I've been kind of dreading this day. This is our last time together talking about Daniel in this particular series. You may wonder why today. Since the last time we were together, we talked on chapter 10. And for those who've been peeking or remember, there are 12 chapters in Daniel. And so far, we've been spending at least 1 week on every chapter. And I thought about going through Daniel 11 with you, and we'll touch on it today. But I remember some classes I took in history. Some were far more enjoyable than others. I enjoyed the history classes where we talked about stories a lot. I enjoy the prophecies of the Bible when they're symbolic prophecies. It holds my interest. There's a lot for me to dig and understand and capture my imagination. Daniel 11 is quite different in character and content, the way it's presented, from the other prophecies of Daniel. If I were to cover all of those verses in Daniel 11, I'm sure that we would be here for some time today, and most of you would be sawing logs by the time we finish. For it's interesting that when we get into Daniel 11, it is quite detailed in its historical application, absent most of the symbols we're used to. And if we were careful to look, we would find that it simply follows many of the major historical details from Daniel's day up until the present time. I brought a little paraphrase that I'm going to share with you in a little bit, but let me remind you of a verse of Scripture that records some of the words of Christ. It's found in John chapter 14, verse 29. John 14:29. I chose to use the New King James today. You will notice, of course, that Jesus has been preparing his disciples for his absence. John 14, you remember, is the one that begins, "Let not your heart be troubled." Remember that? Many of you know it by heart. Verse 29, "And now I have told you before it comes, that when it does come to pass," what? When it does come to pass, what? You may believe. I want to suggest to you that it's almost without exception that biblical prophecies that have been given have been rarely understood in their detail prior to the facts about which they speak. It is after we see those events transpire that the prophecies foretold, that then we look and we say, look, God knew this all along. And it confirms our faith, and it helps us understand that it did not take him by surprise, nor should it concern us that God is not aware of what we're dealing with and what we have to face in this world. And when we look at chapter 11 of Daniel, that's particularly true, because the details fit the events of history so closely and carefully and in such detail. I brought a little paraphrase that's in a book that I recommend for the study of Daniel by Leslie Harding. It's called "Jesus is My Judge." Other books I would recommend for you, because you've only got a taste here in Sabbath sermons. Other books I would recommend are The Secrets of Daniel, or Secrets of Daniel Unlocked. Anyway, the book by Jacques Ducan on Daniel. God Cares on Daniel by Mervyn Harding. Did I say Mervyn Harding? I meant Mervyn Maxwell. Two great men, by the way, both with the name of Mervyn. Mervyn is Leslie's brother. And then, there are other good ones. Actually, one of the good commentaries, some of you may wonder why, but one of the best commentaries on Daniel that I enjoy is just simply entitled Daniel. It's written by a man named Desmond Ford. And I wish he had followed all the things that he has in his commentary on Daniel to our present day. There are other really good books out there. So you need to be studying. There's no lack of resources. And the things that I share with you are not original with me. They come from many of God's wonderful, dedicated scholars and servants. But remember, we're told to test the spirits, to try the spirits. So when you study someone, be sure you're always comparing for yourself with the Scriptures to see that what they are concluding is what the Scriptures teach. I brought this little paraphrase by Les Harding, who actually takes Daniel 11, and throughout this one chapter, he intersperses the verses of Daniel 11 written with the names of the various players written in, so that we can see how the details of Daniel 11 fit. I'm going to read just a sampling, just to show you that that's the way it is, and then we'll go to Daniel 12 and talk about it a little bit, all right? Daniel 11:1. As for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I, Gabriel, stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Now I will make the truth known to you. Listen. After Darius the Mede, there remain 3 important Persian kings to reign: Cambyses, Gomatis, or Pseudo-Smerdis. You know, with these long names, I've got to use my glasses. And Darius Hystaspes, then the 4th, Xerxes, by the way, the husband of Esther, remember that one? Shall be far richer than them all. When he has become strong through his wealth, he will rouse all against the realm of Greece. Notice, it begins with a little history, future history, of the kingdom that's in power in the days of Daniel. Then in verse 3, but a warrior king, and he puts the name in here, Alexander the Great, shall arise to overthrow Persia. He shall extend his rule over a great empire and do as he wishes. When Alexander reaches the zenith of his power, his kingdom shall be broken by one of the 4 winds and divided into 4 segments. History followed that to the T. Not, however, to his sons Hercules or Alexander Aegis the 4th, nor according to the extent of his former dominions, for his kingdom shall be uprooted and given to others. And then he goes on, the king of the sun. You can see how that would bore you after a while, wouldn't it? But just let me suggest to you that if you want to test out the prophecy of the Bible, compare Daniel 11 with the events of history. And it's amazing how that in Daniel's day, the angel Gabriel could give him these specific words that fit the events of the nations, the kingdoms, the rulers to come down through the ages. And it's all past history in our day up through verse 40 of Daniel 11. There is still some question then between verses 41 through the end of the chapter, but I think you would if you looked at these commentators, you could find some pretty good help in understanding some of the details that are still future. Remembering that we can't be too glib when we're talking about future events. But there are some things that we can know for sure about the future, and that's what I want to talk about today. You know, history's good, especially for history teachers and history buffs. And the older I've become, I guess because I have more history behind me, the more I enjoy history. When I was a student in academy, I detested history. I thought it was the boringest class I had. I remember getting called in by my professor. He says, "What's wrong?" "All your grades," and he told me about all my grades, how good they were. He says, "With the exception of my class." Why is that? And being the truthful gentleman that I was as a teenager, I said, "Well, I just don't like history." I hope I said that, and I didn't say I don't like your class. But anyway, that's Daniel 11. Lots of history. I want you to look now with me at chapter 12 of Daniel. A couple of things to note that are of interest. You will notice that Daniel 11 that we just talked about, which has such great historical detail, is one of the longest chapters in Daniel. 45 verses, is it? If you were to go back to Daniel 2, you would find a similar circumstance. Daniel 1 is notable for its more brief form. Daniel 12 is notable for its brevity of only 13 verses. And by the way, that points out some of the structural detail of the book of Daniel. Some of the chiastic structure that you've heard me talk about before. We won't get into all that, because that would bore us very much like history would. But it is notable that in the first chapter, we come across a king who is a heathen king who is victorious in battle over God's people. What's exciting is that in chapter 12, we have a prince again, a mighty prince, who is also victorious in battle. But this prince is the prince of God's people. And whereas it looked like God's people were being defeated and annihilated and destroyed in chapter 1, we find in chapter 12 that God and his people are victorious, not only over the Babylonians, but over all the forces of evil and over death itself. Could there be any more exciting way to end a book? Let's read it. Chapter 12, verse 1. At that time, Michael shall stand up. You remember what we talked about, the name of Michael? What it means? Michael. Is there a Mike here that knows the meaning of his name? What's his name mean? Anybody know? Yes, he's the archangel, but that's not the meaning of the name. He's the archangel not because he's an angel, remember. We talked about that. I'm not going to try to establish that today because we dealt with it in detail before. This is Christ, the Prince of Princes, the King of Kings, and the Lord of Lords. It is the leader of all the angels. The only one who is like God for sure. Hebrews 1 says he is the express image, the exact representation of the Father. One who is like El. One who is like God. That's Michael. And what does Michael do? What's he do here in verse 1? He rises. He stands to his feet. I want to show you another time in Scripture when he has stood to his feet. Keep your finger in Daniel chapter 12 and turn with me to the book of Acts. Is it chapter 9? Let's see. The stoning of Stephen. Help me find that. I think that's chapter 7. Pardon me? I want 56. Chapter 7, verse 56. Yes. 54 is where it starts, so we might as well start there. Let me give you the setting. Stephen, one of the 7 deacons, the original deacons, has been preaching before the Sanhedrin. And he has been telling them the history of their people and about all the prophets that they had stoned or they had killed or they had persecuted and rejected. And then he talks to them about Jesus of Nazareth, the Messiah, that they have just recently killed. And as he's telling them this, their consciences bother them so much that they rise up, but they don't rise up to confess their sin. They rise up to stone another prophet, Stephen. And the leading body of the nation of Israel, in fulfillment of prophecy way back in Daniel's day, the ultimate end of the 490, the 7 sevens we talked about from Daniel 9. In 34 AD, that nation as a body rejected the gospel message, rejected the Messiah that had been sent to them, and they stoned one of his great voices, Stephen. I want you to see now the picture Stephen sees as he dies under the stones, the hail of stones from the Sanhedrin, while Saul of Tarsus stands there watching their coats. By the way, what does Saul become? Paul the apostle to the Gentiles. Verse 54, when they heard these things, they were cut to the heart, and they gnashed at him with their teeth. But he, being full of the Holy Spirit, gazed into heaven. And what did he see? Saw the glory of God, and Jesus what? Standing at the right hand of God. See, I believe Jesus is standing in honor of Stephen. And he's standing not only to bring a certain historical period to an end, he's standing with Stephen as well. When Jesus stands, 2 things happen, at least. Something major comes to an end. Something is completed and done. And he stands with his people through it. He is with us through it all. He was with Stephen even in death. So here in chapter 12, Daniel 12, at that time Michael shall stand up. At what time? Well, we'll see. The great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. What is this time when Jesus stands and there's a time of trouble such as has not been ever in this earth? Let me show you where I believe it is. Revelation chapter 22, verse 11. By the way, we'll start with verse 10 actually. Revelation 22:10. I want you to notice, we're jumping ahead here. We're going to see in Daniel 12 that Daniel's prophecies are sealed up at his day, during his day. Interesting comment in chapter 10 of Revelation 22 about the prophecies of John. And he said to me, do not seal the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. And then what does Jesus himself say? He who is unjust, let him be unjust still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. See, these words should be in red, if you have a red letter edition. In mine, they're in black. They have misunderstood who's speaking. He who is righteous, let him be righteous still. He who is holy, let him be holy still. And behold, I come quickly. So, there will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time, your people will, now get excited about this, your people will be what? Delivered. Delivered. Everyone who is found written where? In the book. What book? What book? Remember, the judgment involves some books. But there's one book of all books that I'm most interested in. And it's this one. Don't you want to have your name in that book? Because the person whose name is in that book is delivered. Is delivered. Remember, I didn't read on there in Revelation. He says, behold, I come quickly, and my what is with me? My reward is with me. My reward. That's the reward to be found written in the book. It's the book of life. The book of life. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Why do they awake? Because they're in the book of life. Now, there are some that awake for another reason. Because it says, some to everlasting life. Those are the ones in the book of life. Some to shame and everlasting contempt. Now, we could get into a detailed study here on that one. Let me commend you to Revelation 20 and to Jesus' words in Matthew 24 when he's talking about the end of time to help you with the resurrections. Verse 3, those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like what? Like the stars forever and ever. Excuse me. You know, in this old world, once in a while, we see on the news somebody looking down at a star in a sidewalk in the southern part of our state. Have any of you ever seen that sidewalk? Do any of you have a star there? No? Oh. How terrible. You have a star there, Nick? Oh, you do? I didn't know that. Someday you'll have to lead me to it so I can see it. The star that I want are those stars that God himself gives us. And the one who knows all the stars by name is the one who's going to cause us to shine forever and ever. What do you do to shine forever and ever in God's kingdom? What were the qualifications there? Those who are wise. Those who are wise. Wise. Did you know that word wise? There's a word it comes from, actually, if you were to take not the Greek, but the Hebrew, mashkil. Actually, what is that? Trying to remember which that one is. It means a song. It's in the title of several of the Psalms. And so it suggests here to me that these folk are singing the praises of God in their wisdom. Their wisdom is a reflection of God and the glory of God. And they're wise because they turn many to righteousness and they teach them about God's true wisdom. Did you know those few verses, that nice little Hebrew poem there, Daniel 12, 1 through 3, is an exciting future for everyone who wishes to have it. But I want you to notice now a couple more things in this chapter. Notice what the angel says to Daniel now. Verse 4. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and do what? seal the book. Seal the book until when? The time of the end. Have we seen that word time of the end before in the book of Daniel? You notice other prophecies have been for the time of the end. We came across it back there in chapter 8, didn't we? Remember when we were talking about the 2300th Yom Kippur, the 2300th evening morning, the 2300-year time prophecy? It went till the time of the end. So we see that the book of Daniel has something to do with the world when that prophecy was coming to its conclusion. Do you remember what we talked about the time period of the 2300 days? When did we suggest that it would come to an end? That long time prophecy. 1844. Remember, it started in 457 BC with that edict of King Cyrus to rebuild the temple and the city. And now Daniel's words are sealed until the time of the end. He says, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. And I think he's referring to the time of the end. We'll come back to that. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood two others, one on the river bank and the other on that river bank. And one said to the man clothed in linen. What did we talk about when we said we saw a man clothed in linen, fine linen, pure and white? Remember, that's the high priestly garment on the Day of Atonement. This takes us back to Daniel 8 again. There's a connection here. This is the high priest. This is Christ, the only high priest who has any validity for us today. He's above the waters of the river. How long shall be the fulfillment of these wonders? Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters and the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven. Notice. And he swore by him who lives forever. These must be important things he's talking about. Do we take them that way? It shall be for a time, times, and half a time. Have we heard about that before? That harkens back, doesn't it, to the 1260 days we talked about of the persecution of God's people at the hand of the little horn power. So during that time, that's going to happen. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. Although I heard, I did not understand. Then I said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel. For the words are closed up and sealed, just like we saw in verse 4, till the time of the end. So if this is true, we should expect there to come a time before Jesus' advent when the book of Daniel would take on special significance in this earth. Has it ever happened so far in history? Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Not very long. Many shall be purified, made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Well, that's a different one, isn't it? Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days, but you go your way till the end. For you, talking of Daniel, shall rest. What does he mean, you shall rest? Do you remember a little verse in chapter 14 of Revelation, verse 13? Blessed are they which die in the Lord from henceforth, says the Spirit. What happens? For their works do follow them. That's the kind of rest he's talking about. Daniel will die, but he will simply rest and sleep, awaiting the great resurrection day, and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days, it says here. Now, There's some other translations that give you an idea that this is a little bit more than talking about the resurrection of Daniel per se. If you read other translations, you get the idea that in the end of time, in the last days, Daniel will have another ministry yet to fulfill. You remember, it's been told us twice in verse 4, and then again down here in verse 9, that this is closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Keep your finger here. Let me just read a few verses for you in Revelation chapter 10. I just want to read it, and I want you to think about these verses in relationship to what it just told us about Daniel being sealed, and yet there was still a ministry for him to do. Revelation 10:1, and I saw still another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. And he had a little book open in his hand, and he set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land, and cried with a loud voice as when a lion roars. And when he cried out, 7 thunders uttered their voices. Wouldn't you love to hear that? Now, when the 7 thunders uttered their voices, I was about to write, John says, but I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, seal up the things which the 7 thunders uttered, do not write them. And the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land lifted up his hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and earth. This sounds a lot like the text we just read here in Daniel 12, doesn't it? Now look at verse 8. Then the voice which I heard from heaven spoke to me again and said, go, take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea and on the earth. And I went to the angel and said to him, give me the little book. And he said, take it and eat it. And it will make your stomach bitter, but it will be as sweet as honey in your mouth. Which experience happens first when you eat something? The mouth experience or the stomach experience? So it's describing a very sweet, tasteful experience as a result of the consuming of a book, followed by a very bitter experience someplace down in history. And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it, and it was as sweet as honey in my mouth. But when I had eaten it, my stomach became bitter. And he said to me, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. That, of course, is language from Revelation 14:1, where the angel has a gospel message to send to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. And then, of course, if you were to follow in chapter 11, you'll find there's a message about measuring God's sanctuary. Let me sum it up. There have been a people who have preached the book of Daniel. Daniel began to be preached especially in the earliest decades, the first half of the 19th century. Daniel was preached in the United States, in South America, in Europe, all over this globe. There was a movement studying the book of Daniel and preaching about the second coming of Jesus. There was a group of people, especially in the northeastern part of our country, who were studying the book of Daniel, and especially inspired by the studies of a Baptist farmer turned preacher named William Miller. And under their studies came to a deep conviction from Daniel 8, verse 14, that Jesus' coming would occur first, they thought, in 1843. And then after a refinement of their methods of study and the dates and understanding the AD BC transition and all these kinds of things, they realized it was really 1844. I want to submit to you that Daniel 12, Revelation 10 and 11 describe clearly that experience. And there is no other historical event that fits the details of Daniel 12 and Revelation 10 and 11. Blessed is he, it says, who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. Let me just tell you quickly. The 1,260 days we've talked about a lot. 538 to 1798. It took about 30 years from the time that Clovis became a Christian king until Justinian really gave power to this little horn power, where they actually began to have the persecuting power they needed. But if you were to start with Clovis, 508, and you added the 1290, it ends up to be the same exact year it ends as the 1260. And if you began in 508 with 1335, it ends in the same one-year period, 1843 to 1844, as the ending of the 2300-day prophecy. And we've already noted before that there are many time periods. It seems to be a Hebrew prophecy characteristic, especially in the book of Daniel, that many of the shorter periods are included in longer periods of time. So when we talk about the 70 years, when we talk about the 490 years, when we talk about the 1260, the 1290, and the 1335, we find that they all seem to be related to a 2300-year prophecy, which is the longest of them all. Which takes us, of course, up to the time of the end, in which we've been in for some time. Well, I know that that's kind of crisp in detail and abbreviated in content, but maybe it will give you a little bit of food for thought for your own study. May I remind you that there comes a day very soon in this old tumultuous world when Michael will stand. Michael will stand to bring some things to an end. Sometimes we call that the close of probation. I can hardly wait. I can hardly wait, because when he stands, he also stands with his people. And if there was ever a time his people need him, it's in the time of trouble such as never was. We don't know the details of exactly how that'll transpire or when. But all the events that we see in our world, comparing with Bible prophecy, we know it cannot be that long. Whatever the case, should it happen in our lifetime or not, I believe that we can be assured, as was Daniel, if we simply allow what God said to Daniel to be true for us. But you go your way till the end, for you shall rest. We shall rest. Most of us will rest. Maybe a few sitting here will be able to live to see Jesus come. Daniel, one of God's greatly beloved, had to rest. Should we be any more honored than Daniel? Whatever, should we rest, we will arise to our inheritance at the end of the days. And Daniel 12 helps us, assures us, that though it looks like the enemy is in the ascendancy, Daniel begins with the enemy overpowering the good, the righteous, God's people. And even today, when we look around us, it looks like God's people are in the minority, and it looks like sin has its heyday. Just take a look at the morality of our nation. All you have to do is watch the tube for a little while. All you have to do is even just watch some of the advertisements today to understand where the morality is in our world. We ought to be lifting up our heads, for our redemption draws nigh. And we can be assured, according to the book of Daniel, that though it looks like we're in defeat, Michael will stand up. And he stands for his people. And there comes a day when he will say, let he who is filthy be filthy still. Let he who is righteous be righteous still. Behold, I, what? Come quickly, and my reward is with me. Oh, we ought to be a happy people.